May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. There was a dearly beloved parishioner in a previous parish I had served who lived well into her mid-90s and was sharp as a tack right up until the very end. And she reminded me a lot of my mother. They were two peas from the same pod. And they even met and talked over cups of coffee a few times when my mother came down to visit me. And they both had deep, deep faith. But faith that had gone through some very real trials over their years. And they both had no problem telling you how they felt about something. I still think of each of them telling me that not for nothing, but for their 90-plus years, they had heard these gospel stories 1,000,000 times. And my mother would remind me periodically, do not preach longer than 10 minutes, or actually no longer than 8 minutes. Or maybe 7. So now you know two dearly beloved voices that I always have in my head when I am up here. Two dearly beloved voices challenging me and loving me. And I think of them this morning especially because our gospel this morning is big and so very well known. I think as soon as we hear, now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Martha, that part of us shuts down and sits back because we have heard this story so many times. We know how it goes. And like a favorite bedtime story, there is a comfort in hearing a story so many times that we know who says what and how it is going to end. But in that familiarity, we often miss the pure surprise of it all. Lazarus was dead for 4 days. He was placed in a dark tomb which was sealed with a stone. And his sisters Martha and Mary have been deeply grieved. And their words, "Lord, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." Those words may be heard as a sorrowful "if only," or as downright angry with Jesus for taking so long to show up. And when Jesus finally does show up, I imagine they expect him to console them, maybe even apologize for getting there so late, maybe share a meal together. But Lazarus would remain dead. Well, we hear that Jesus is greatly disturbed. Jesus weeps. Jesus, fully human and fully divine, weeps. And he instructs them to take away the stone. And he cries for Lazarus to come out. And Lazarus does. And Jesus instructs them, unbind him and let him go. Even with the signs that the disciples have witnessed with Jesus, from his turning water into wine at the wedding feast in Cana, to multiplying loaves and fishes and feeding thousands, to giving sight to the man born blind, even with all of these signs, this raising of Lazarus was not expected. This was pure surprise. 20th century theologian Paul Tillich said, "The opposite of faith is not doubt, but certainty. Certainty that something simply cannot happen. Certainty that there is no way new life can possibly come out of death. Certainty that nothing good can come out of a bad situation. Certainty that we know how things will play out." Jesus had asked Martha, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" To believe, at its root, can be translated as, where do you place your heart? Are you willing to trust God? Are you willing to be surprised by God? Willing to trust in God's time, not according to our timetable, in God's ways, not our ways, in God's life, not necessarily our limited life here. Some things, we have to admit, are beyond our control. Is there something that you have placed and sealed in a tomb? Something that you have assumed is dead? Have assumed that relationship is dead? That part of my life is over? That joyous period is over and gone and will never be again? Is there a large stone over dreams that you used to hold? Over loves you used to have? I remember when I was 30, thinking that the window of opportunity had closed for me to even consider pursuing ordination. That at 30, I was too old. Yeah, well, I think differently about 30 nowadays. But then I also thought, well, perhaps I could consider maybe later, when the timing will be right, maybe when the kids are older, but just thinking that I needed to wait for that right time. And years later, with the death of my marriage, I realized that there is no right time for anything. And in that death, that is when I finally stopped putting things off. That I stopped hiding behind that stone that I had placed, and took the risk of starting on that journey, that process towards ordination. And there were never any guarantees. And there have sure been lots of surprises over the many years. And I know we all keep Jackie in our prayers as she continues in her process. New life out of death can take many, many years. It can take a really long time. And we are not given a map or a timeline. And for all of the amazing and wonderful gifts, surprises, and joys along the way, It can have its share of tears at times and can require a lot of work. And transformation may look nothing like what we ever envisioned. Bishop Desmond Tutu often spoke of our God as the God of surprises, making a way out of no way. The God of surprises, especially present in the truth and reconciliation process following the end of apartheid in South Africa, through the conversations and healing which unfolded, through much work and commitment, and the grace and presence of this God of surprises. No matter how many times we have heard the stories of God and God's people, may we allow ourselves to be surprised by this God who created us and loves us, who calls us to new life and sets us free. And may we see the hand of God in all the small blessings and surprises that surround us each and every day, revealing the glory of God. Amen.